And now we get to hear from a fiction writer I very much admire and am so lucky to call my friend, too. Mary Helen Specht's debut novel is available for sale right over here on the table as well. Migratory Animals. It was an editor's choice by the New York Times Book Review and the Austin American-Statesmen. Migratory Animals also won the Texas Institute of Letters Best First Fiction Award. She's currently an associate professor of creative writing at St. Edward's University. Let's welcome Mary Helen.
Thank you. I'm so excited I just got to hear part of that book. I've been wanting to get a sneak peek of what I was working on, so can't wait to read more. So I'm actually going to read for the very first time from a new novel I've been working on the last several years. It's set in New Mexico, and the protagonist, whose name is Piero Wilson, is an artist. And in the first chapter of the book, he shows up at the door of a much older female famous artist whom he hopes to convince to kind of mentor him and help jumpstart his career. And then an interesting kind of relationship ensues. But the section I'm actually going to read tonight is a couple of chapters in, and it's a flashback to when he was a boy living in South America, in Chile. All right. The first celebrity Piero ever saw in person was the poet Pablo Neruda. Valparaiso, Chile, where his family moved for his father's music ministry when Piero was 12 years old, was a successful port town in a blue-collar, industrial way. Inconveniently, the land surrounding the port punched directly up into hills, and so the brightly painted houses were built along steep slopes and cliff faces. Ascensores, short, vertical, funicular railways, tracked up the various hills connecting neighborhoods and shantytowns to the city center, built on landfill along the water. Piero memorized the footpath and staircase shortcuts, arriba and abajo, which was how you were supposed to describe where you lived. Arriba, pointing upward, or abajo, nodding down. During the months it took him to start to learn Spanish and to make friends, he spent his afternoons sketching. A way to be in the world without drawing attention to the fact that he was out of place in it. He missed his best friend, Spare Rib, from back home. But it was also the first time Piero realized art could be a friend too, a placeholder, a reason to get through the day. Though he only lived in town a few months a year, Pablo Neruda was Valpo's local celebrity. The poet and elder statesman had built one of his 3 residences atop Cerro Bellavista. The house was boxy and modern, and at first Piero would have said ugly, though it grew on him, and it was situated on the hill's highest point, so all the west-facing windows had views of the Pacific, which was why it was said that Neruda never missed the New Year's Eve fireworks in Valparaiso. When Piero witnessed something that might make a good poem, an albatross diving to snatch a fish from the salty air, or learned something he thought impressive, like how his father said Sputnik could probably see right into Neruda's windows to spy on him, Piero always told the old poet about it in his head. In a way, it wasn't all that different from how his father treated Jesus as his own personal confidant, saying things like, I mentioned this to Christ, and he's disappointed too. Word traveled when Neruda was in town. Sometimes Piero and his classmates would take the ascensor up the hill and play soccer on a street nearby, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous man, usually wearing a dapper cap and strange square-toed shoes, as roundly fat as his wives and mistresses were reedy. The poet hosted glamorous parties attended by outsiders in fancy cars, and once, when Piero was walking by with his mother, she gave a pained smile. Ah, the life of a real artist. Piero was attuned enough to hear the bitterness, and so he said, Pablo Neruda can't play the piano like you. Her laugh was sharp. What does it matter if there's no one to hear? Real artists must be successful enough for the beauty inside to escape into the world. Piero felt wounded by her words. Wasn't he an audience? Despite her own classical training, Piero's mother never taught him to read music as a boy or to practice scales. She would say, "Follow the path of notes that light up behind your closed eyelids, or you will never arrive." Pierre would watch her play and mimic her movements, or listen to the radio, close his eyes and try to feel where the notes resided. He never saw any particular path light up behind his eyelids. She said he had pianist fingers, and he believed her, and the one thing she did make him do for practice was to button and unbutton her laundered shirts with their slim slots and tiny, delicate buttons, using only the very tips of his fingers. Tender, subtle movements, the antithesis of what he did all afternoon with spare rib, hurling pigskin through the air with thick, blunt force. Later, he would wonder why she was so relaxed with his training. At the time, it had seemed like a reaction to her own, which she described as draconian. But as an adult, he wondered if there wasn't more to it. Surely she must have known he could never make it as a musician with no discipline, no technique. Did she realize he wasn't talented at the piano? Or was she disappointed by her own life, that she didn't have the energy to spur him on in her wake and risk living through a second failure? He stopped playing the piano when they moved to Chile, but he never forgot how it felt to move his fingers like that, independently, like an octopus dancing in the water. He never forgot how it felt to slide silky mother-of-pearl buttons into place. And when he first tried ceramics in a college art class, he closed his eyes, feeling the wet clay beneath his palm, and he could have sworn, in that moment, a string of notes lit up behind his eyelids. Sitting there in front of the spinning pottery wheel, Pierrot vowed to redeem his mother and all that life had denied her. One afternoon when Pierrot was 15, alone on Neruda Street, dribbling a soccer ball between his insteps, putting off going home, he looked up to see the old poet watching him from his doorway. The man beckoned to Pierrot, asking in a clipped, gruff voice if the boy wanted to see his collection of figureheads, which Pierrot would later learn was the name for the carved women on the prows of ships. Pierrot's heart was beating so hard he thought he might faint. He wanted to nod his head and follow a famous poet inside. But his body rebelled and he ran in the other direction, zigzagging a bopple. When Pierrot walked up to Ghost Ranch and knocked on O'Brien's door, it had felt as though he were reversing something from his childhood, seizing something important that belonged to him. Thank you.